Hey everybody, it's Jonathan Martin. I'm doing week 3 blog. I just got done doing my leadership skills questionnaire, and I scored a 25 on the administrative skill, a 28 on the interpersonal skill, and a conceptual skill of 27. Um, and I would use this in line with the skills described in Chapter 7, um, things like planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, controlling, things like that. I do a lot of that now in the role that I'm in right now, but not necessarily to the point of a manager. If I were the manager, I would, of course, come up with a plan for the floor, uh, come up with some type of organizational process to essentially roll that plan out. Um, in terms of staffing, uh, one thing that I liked when I worked at another hospital that we did is we actually used a point system to determine how much staff that we needed. And I know that staffing a lot of times comes from administration, but the way that we had it at the hospital that I came from before I came actually over to this one, which is Wake Med, um, we had a point system. So if, let's say for instance that I needed 4 or 5 nurses or something like that, and I had a certain amount of patients on the floor that said I needed 5.3 nurses. Well, I can then not round down, but round up to 6 nurses, so I could actually have 6 nurses on the floor at any given time, which made it lovely when the patients would be leaving and admissions and things like that. The nurses were very able to handle their workload, and they seemed to be genuinely happy. They had time to spend with their patients, talk to them. I think the care was great when we had that type of system, as opposed to when we changed to a more strict, this is what it's going to be type of system. You can only have this amount of nurses for this amount of patients, which I know is what a lot of hospitals do, and it does save money, but I think that it affects the quality of care that the patients receive. So if I could do something like that, that would be my preference. In terms of like directing, I would direct the staff after I come up with the plan, the organizing, and then I would direct the staff to make sure that they knew exactly what the plan was, and to make sure that they knew how the plan was supposed to roll out. That way, when it came time to implement the plan, they were on board and they knew exactly what to do. In terms of like coordinating, I would then step back, make sure that everything, because I am a coordinator by trade right now, make sure that everything, in a sense, is flowing well, and making sure that everything with the plan is being initialized and that it is being taken care of. In terms of controlling, I would make sure that in the end, is it working for the company? Is it working for the organization? Is it working for the staff? Is it working for me? Making sure that all of these factors coming into play are then being carried out, and are they working for everyone involved? In terms of like the transdisciplinary model solution, I actually read an article called "Resistance to Change in the Nursing Profession: Creative Transdisciplinary Solutions," and it brought up some very good points about using a transdisciplinary approach or a model to essentially look inward first at yourself to make sure that what you were going to be doing worked for you, and then looking outward towards the company and saying, okay, will this work for the company or the organization that you're part of? And then looking at the staff, will it work for the staff? Because essentially, if it doesn't work for you, it's probably not going to work for them, and then vice versa. It may work or sound good in theory to you, and then when you try to initialize it or something like that, it's not going to work for the staff. And if that's the case, then you have to go back to the drawing board or manipulate whatever it is that you're working on to make sure that it actually is going to work for the staff. So that's how I would use that. In terms of like the different departments and things like that I would have to use as a manager, I think one of the ones that we take for most granted is the environmental services department. We don't realize how they actually control the flow of the hospital, and they really do. There are unsung heroes essentially in the hospital system, because if it weren't for them cleaning the rooms on time, and we wouldn't be able to get these patients in and out the way that we do. but also working with physical therapy, occupational therapy, so the therapy departments, working with the hospitalist departments if your hospital or the place you work at has one of those, which is essentially the hospital physicians that work for the hospital itself. Also, working with administration and case management to make sure that we have what we need, and then the flow of the floor is moving the way it's supposed to be. Because without physical therapy and case management and these other systems, or these other groups, physical therapy has to clear a lot of patients for discharge. Case management has to make sure that these patients have what they need for discharge, and that the facilities that they are going to are already set up for them, and sometimes transportation to those facilities. And then, of course, your nursing staff, which is the backbone of the hospital. Do you have enough staff? And, are your staff happy, essentially? And keeping staff happy, keeping them retention, and things like that. I would feel more of a preference, I think, too, for more of a horizontal structure, in terms of like the way that the floor goes. I think that people tend to do better, not necessarily with that, but I know that the vertical has a hierarchy which has its place within the hospital, and both of these mesh to create the hospital organization. But I am more in tune with the horizontal structure myself at this point, because I am not an administrator, I think is why. So I would prefer to do that type of structure, just because it is familiar to me, and I know how to kind of manipulate. Maybe manipulate, that's the wrong word, but maybe to flow through that type of structure to make sure that the hospital's needs, the floor needs, and the staff's needs are being met. I hope that answers all the questions, and thank you all for listening. Thank you. Bye.